First for breaking news and the best live sport.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
It's your call now. I'm Nicky Campbell. Good morning. Why do homegrown terrorists want to blow us up? 3 men, all from Birmingham, guilty, planning an attack to rival the 7th July London bombings. They were critical of the 7/7 bombers. Haris Rafiq from the counter-terrorism organisation Sentry says they intended to kill and maim as many people as they could.
There was potential up to 8 rucksack bombs. There was the mixing of poisonous chemicals which were then to be deployed on door handles and car handles. The last resort was that they were potentially getting rifles, just going on a shooting spree in places like synagogues, etc.
Why are young British men who go through our schools or universities being radicalised? What can be done about it? Professor Anthony Glees is from the Centre for Security and Intelligence Studies at the University of Buckingham.
We've got to make sure that radical preachers don't visit universities, and we also need to encourage members of the Muslim community not to see themselves as separate from Britain.
Difficult question, no easy answers. 0500 909 693. You can tweet us at BBC 5 Live. With 5 Live from the BBC. Why do some British-born Muslims want to commit mass murder? Raffaello Fanito joins us, Senior Research Fellow at the Royal United Services Institute, author of a forthcoming book, We Love Death as You Love Life, Britain's Suburban Mujahideen. You sound like an excellent guest in the making, Raffaello. Good morning.
Thank you so much. Good morning. And if I might just quickly correct, my surname is Pantucci.
Oh, I do beg your pardon.
It's quite all right. No worries.
All right. And Dr. Osama Hassan, Senior Researcher in Islamic Studies at Quilliam Foundation, a counter-extremism think tank. Osama, hi.
Good morning.
Hi, and we've got Nasser in Heathrow to speak to in a second. Good morning, Nasser.
Good morning.
Good morning. Osama, you're in a really interesting position here because you were, in your younger days, pretty radical, weren't you?
Yes, and I went off to fight in Afghanistan 20 years ago against the Afghan communist forces. Friends of mine went to fight in the Bosnian War in the 90s, and some even went to Chechnya to fight. But it never crossed our mind to commit violence in this country. I mean, that's the whole point. We travelled thousands of miles to experience our youthful ambition of military action overseas. It was really cool, learning guns and fighting overseas. But what we have now is this generation of people whose mind is so warped that they want to kill their fellow British citizens.
Why? You say their minds are warped. What is warping their minds, in your belief?
Fundamentally, it's ideology. It's the idea that Muslims, these people are trying to be devout Muslims. You can see that with their robes and turbans and long beards and things. And they think that Muslims cannot coexist with others, and that Muslims have to have their own separate states with Islamic law, Islamic state caliphate, enforcing a narrow version of Sharia, and that non-Muslims are, kuffar, who are to be demonized and hated, and they are worthless and it's okay to kill people. That's the kind of divisive and extremist messaging which is unfortunately preached by some radical hate preachers in this country, day in, day out, week in, week out, at some mosques and university campuses, including in London and Birmingham.
So it's a racist, so it's a racist ideology, or a supremacist ideology. We are superior, they are inferior.
Yes, our lifestyle is better than theirs, hence the despising of Western culture, for example, and therefore thinking, well, the only way to deal with it, we can't be part of that. Muslims cannot live in that kind of society, and in fact, even better, one has to withdraw from it and then attack it. And that's the ideology of Al-Qaeda, basically. And unfortunately, young men are still subscribing to that.
Nasser, what do you think?
Yeah, hello. This actually debate needs a lot of time to answer all these questions. But what I understand is that from my own, as just a normal Muslim British citizen living in this country, born in this country, is that I think most people are angry, most Muslims are angry with Western foreign policy. But that does not mean that majority of Muslims would resort to violence. There are young people who are misguided and would think of resorting to this sort of violence, because Islam is very clear that there is no justification of killing innocent people, doesn't matter what grievance you have. And I just want to ask you a question personally yourself. When you say radical, what do you mean by that?
What do we mean by radical, Raffaello?
Well, I mean, in this specific context, we're clearly talking about individuals who have been radicalized by the narrative that Osama hinted at very correctly, who have been persuaded by these sorts of what we could describe as al-Qaedist ideas that that their enemy is the West and their enemy is this society here in the United Kingdom, and the duty, their role within this whole process is to carry out attacks and kill people in this country.
Okay, so what you're basically saying is, because I thought when you guys say radical, what you mean that it's a teaching of Islam. But Islam is very clear that if you kill one human being, you have killed the whole of humanity. And if you save one human being, you have saved the whole of humanity, right?
I think you're 100% right, and I'm sure that Osama here can say this a lot more, will agree with me. Or
let me bring Osama in on this, because Osama is a scholar of the Quran as well, and translates Hadith. I have a book that Osama indeed gave me of his own translations, a very beautiful book. But Osama, it also says, and this is where, it's kind of like the Old Testament. You can take a bit here out of context. You can take a bit there out of context, or some people would say completely in context. That's another argument. And you can say, that is my justification. There is a bit in the Quran which says, seek out the infidels and wherever you find them, slay them. Words to that effect, Osama. And so I suppose these people are reading that out of context, are they?
Exactly, totally. And that's what we call literalism or fundamentalism, where you read scripture completely devoid of any historical context. So the verses you mentioned, Nicky, are there, and they were for a particular time. The Arabian pagans who were trying to exterminate the Muslims, the Prophet Muhammad and his followers in Mecca and Medina, and that permission was given them. They had to fight back. But this is where I disagree with Nasser in terms of the foreign policy argument is flogging a dead horse, because Islam is very clear as a religion of peace and love. However, we have the Pakistani Taliban, we have the Afghan Taliban, we have violence every day in Syria and Iraq and places like that. Unfortunately, there are extremist interpretations of Islam which are promoted by charismatic and radical preachers, and that needs to be challenged. That's one of the things we try to do here at Quilliam, is to recover the scripture and the authentic interpretation of Islam and put it in keeping with the modern world, because otherwise, with the fundamentalist interpretations, young men and women think they cannot live in the modern world, basically, and they have to reject it and despise it and hate it and go to the extent of trying to kill people.
And Nasser,
but these people are misguided. What I'm trying to say is that Nicky, when you asked, you quoted that verse, that whenever you find a disbeliever, kill him, right? But it's every Muslim's duty to, find out about the Quran, because like Osama clearly said, that verse is about when the Hudaybiyah agreement was broken between the Meccans and the Muslims, and then it was ordered, because they broke the peace agreement, now you must fight them because they killed you first, right? But what I'm saying is, we Muslims need to have a dialogue within ourselves. The Muslim scholars need to come in and tell, the ordinary Muslims what Islam is about. Islam is not about violence. It's not about, killing innocent people. So these things are the verses that you just quoted. The Muslim scholar's duty is to teach the Muslims, especially young Muslims in Britain, about the Quran and guide them, to the true Islam, So this is the true fundamental of Islam. So these people who, in the name of Islam, kill people, innocent people, right, are misguided people.
Okay. I want to ask you something, if I may, Nasser, because you said initially, and you're saying a lot of very interesting things. You said there is anger about foreign policy, but it in no way justifies killing innocent people. And a few people are saying that on texts. But there might be, say for example, I cannot tell you my opinions, but say I was angry about British foreign policy. Say, for example, I thought that it was an illegal war in Iraq. Say that I thought British troops should not be in Afghanistan. Say that I thought the drone killings were appalling, unjustified, and all that. It doesn't make me want to kill my fellow citizens. So what's the difference and why?
It's a good question. I mean, I'm not that sort of person with that sort of mentality to, just to get angry and kill people. But what I'm saying is that only thing I can say is that because these people are young and, some of them get a kick out of violence, so maybe they're just doing that for that reason. And, they resort to this sort of, to this planning to kill innocent people. But I mean, there's no justification for it. So, I mean, I can't answer that question, why these people do that. But all I can say that also it's which you must make it very clear. It's an Islamic law that when, as a Muslim, when you're living in a non-Muslim country, you must respect the laws of that country and respect those citizens,
Oh, well, thank you very much. Okay, that's the reason I leave it is I've got a news flash and we've got other people to talk to, but Nasser, you've made a very valuable contribution. I thank you for calling us. We're going to speak to Hassan in Manchester and Ali in central London. We've still got Dr. Osama Hassan, and we've still got Raffaello Pantucci as well, who is we're going to ask him more about his book. But first of all, this news is just in bird's eye. We've got Hassan in Manchester, Ali in central London. Somebody's got a radio on because I can hear myself echoed. Raffaello, tell us about the premise behind your book, We Love Death as You Love Life, Britain's Suburban Mujahideen.
Well, the premise is this is a history, and I believe it's one of the first. I'm trying to make the most comprehensive history of jihadism in the United Kingdom, how it sort of arrived here, how it sort of inculcated itself within the United Kingdom, and then how it found a root amongst some of the younger British Muslim community, and created a sort of pipeline of individuals who were going from the United Kingdom, being radicalized here, going to Pakistan or other places to connect ultimately with extremist groups like Al-Qaeda.
Ali in central London. Osama's still with us. Ali, what do you want to say?
Hi, Nicky. Good morning to you and to all of your viewers and guests. Look, we've had troubles on these shores for many a decade. Asked, and somewhat rhetorically asked this, what made people like Jerry Adams, Martin McGuinness encourage and take part in blowing up their fellow citizens in Ireland, in Birmingham, in London, outside the BBC even? The list is very long.
A geopolitical situation, yeah.
The casualty, well, hold on, I'll answer you. I'll give you my viewpoint. They had a grievance against what they perceived to be mainland British colonialism on them. And they used Catholicism, and they justified it because they were the ones who were oppressed by the people who occupied the island and split it and left the flag flying. But if you try shutting them out and shouting them down, to the extent you had that ludicrous situation when Jerry Adams' words used to be spoken by actors because we passed a law, we won't allow him to spout whatever he was spouting. It didn't achieve anything.
In what way did they use Catholicism?
Well, tell me, who were the oppressed minority in
what way did they use Catholicism as a justification?
Well, Nicky, I never went into any of the intimate meetings they had, but the issue here is the Catholics were the minority, and the majority of the people in Northern Ireland who were involved in terrorism had Catholic origins.
Slightly different.
That does not mean every Catholic citizen was a terrorist.
Slightly different
every Catholic citizen wanted to blow up.
Osama, how do we deal with this?
Well, people have grievances, people have political grievances, but there is no sense in justifying terrorism. I think, especially if you ascribe to Islam or Catholicism or any moral or ethical tradition or religion, you have to take the high moral ground. And yes, I was angry about the Afghanistan invasion after 9/11, about the Iraq war, etc., etc. But as a moral person, you're absolutely clear that nothing can justify this kind of madness. And unfortunately, as I said before, there are people who support Al-Qaeda in this country, and there are preachers who preach that message, including from a small number of mosques, from the pulpits, from university Islamic societies, which is why so many graduates of our universities have been convicted for terrorist offences, and they are promoting this perversion of Islamic teaching to say that Muslims and non-Muslims, especially the West, are at war forever, and that war will continue. I mean, the ringleader of the 7/7 bombers said, "This is a war and I'm a soldier," referring to Iraq. He saw himself as a soldier in some kind of global war between Islam and everybody else. And it's clear that these young men convicted yesterday had a very similar mindset. Now, that has to be challenged and openly done so. I think the discussions have to be open around that. What is jihad? What is politics? What's foreign policy about? And how do you deal with these complex situations? But to separate yourself from society and hate everybody around you and kill them is very immoral and really evil. and has to be stamped out.
But also we have a strange double standard, because some people are in denial, and some people say 9/11 wasn't perpetrated by those who say. Some people say it of 7/7 as well, and yet these plotters were saying that they wanted to emulate the 7/7 bombers. So there's a strange double standard going on. And Mohammed Nassim, the head of the Central Mosque in Birmingham, who's all over the radio and television yesterday saying we have to speak to these people to understand why they did it. He's a man who's on record as saying that he thinks 7/7 might have been a government plot. I mean,
Well, yeah, there is a serious problem here, which we probably need a new generation of leaders to address some of this. But large part of the Muslim community have moved on from that denial. You're quite right. People still believe in conspiracy theories around 9/11 and 7/7. But the overwhelming evidence and the increasing number of these plots, nobody can really deny now. So generally, I think the mood has changed. I mean, I've seen that working within Muslim communities over the last 5 or 7 years. People will not deny these plots, but they will start to try to justify them by referring to foreign policy, etc. There is a small shift. We need to move that debate forward and talk as Muslims, as integrated citizens of this country, and stop thinking we are a separate community apart who live in an enclave or a ghetto with a victim or siege mentality. That has to stop. It's utterly unacceptable, and it's very childish and immature, really. And the whole of the British public, our discourse has to become more mature around these issues to deal with a very serious problem. You know, we have British suicide bombers in our midst, people ready to kill hundreds and thousands. This is a very serious social problem which has to be addressed now.
OK. Hassan's in Manchester, Craig's in Coventry. Hello, good morning, Hassan.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, Craig.
Morning.
On you go, Craig.
Well, Nicky, the first thing that upset me this morning was when we put the phone in, and then within 30 seconds you called them radicalised. I mean, why aren't we calling them what they are? They're fascists. You wouldn't think twice, Nicky, of calling Nick Griffiths on the radio a fascist or a Nazi. So why can't we call these people such things?
Well, I call them supremacists and racists.
I know you did later on. But it's this term keeps being used, radicalised. They are fascists. And it seems like the whole system in this country seems to be acceptable of brown fascism, but not white fascism. It is fascist. It shouldn't be allowed.
Do you think there's a point here, Raffaello? Do you think there's a double standard?
Well, I think, radicalized, I mean, one can use the term radicalized when one talks about fascists or people who espouse those sorts of views as well. It's a sort of adjective that describes individuals who've taken fundamentalist or very extreme work.
You could have said it of David Copeland, the nail bomber, a man who was radicalized. He was
clearly a radicalized young man who had, connected with sort of Combat 18 and other groups like this, but he seems to have independently decided to go and carry out his action. So, I mean, I think the term radicalized is one that's sort of become quite polarizing in this whole debate because it's become sort of emblematic of a certain narrative that we tend to ascribe to a particularly violent and extremist Islamist view. However, I think it's equally applicable to fascists and people on the far right or even on the left as well.
Hassan.
Hi.
Thank you. You're all yours.
I was going to say, this is actually a global problem. There's an ideology here which is spreading hatred around the world. Preaching that anyone who isn't of your faith, you're able to kill without, any problem. If you just look in the Middle East, last week we had people killed in... I can hear myself, by the way. Hello?
Hello, we're hearing you, yeah.
Sorry, just hearing an echo. In Iraq and Pakistan, there's hundreds of people being killed just because they're of the Shia persuasion of Islam, for example. And there's people around the, in the Middle East and being killed and persecuted just because they're a different sect. This is an ideology which is funded and originates from Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. And we need to recognize what this ideology is. That's the first step. And then the second step is work with people who already are able to dismantle this ideology on a theological basis, who are able to go to the people who are being eaten up and brainwashed by these preachers, and able to explain to them the weakness of the ideology, and that way we can move forward.
Osama, what do you think about what Hassan is saying?
Well, what Hassan has said is very sensible, of course, and that work is going on an individual one-to-one basis all around the country, has been. But the fact that over a decade after 9/11 and almost 8 years after 7/7, we still have men ready to become suicide bombers shows there is a very serious problem. And part of this discussion has to go public now, and especially confronting those hate preachers and radical preachers who preach violence. As I say, in a small number of mosques and university campuses, this is still going on. We know of mosques run by extremists in London and Birmingham and other places who are sympathetic to these kinds of ideas. And they've been unfortunately allowed to continue. Nobody's been prosecuted. The Charity Commission has allowed the mosque to continue under charitable licenses. Other security agencies have just kept an eye on what's happening and not really done too much about it. And also Muslim communities have to stand up. The congregation have to reclaim the mosques and say quite openly, we do not want divisive extremist messages of hate. We come to the mosque to learn the love of God and to attain inner peace, and we don't want this constant anger about world events, which will always continue. And faith should provide a tranquil approach to these things, and not one which reinforces the anger narrative.
But there's also another thing here, the anger narrative. There's another thing here, which maybe just as a sort of closing thought from both of you, Raffaello and Dr. Osama Hassan. There is something else here which as well is interesting and worth noting, which is the particular empathy that many Muslims have with their co-religionists. That sense of the ummah, the sense of the worldwide Muslim community globally. Now, this is a very good thing, and it can be a very positive thing and a very admirable thing, but it can also lead to an identification with people in far off lands to the exclusion and the downplaying of the humanity of those who are living next to you.
I think that this is an important point that you make, but I think an important element to highlight beyond that is the fact that that is a sense that is shared by an awful lot of people who never become involved in any sort of terrorist or extremist activity.
That's what I'm saying. It's a positive thing, a good thing, but also through a certain prism.
The reason that individuals do become involved tends to have a whole set of other reasons as well. I think some of the preachers that Osama talks about are a big part of the problem, because they will sort of help specific individuals push them in along another path. But then it's also up to individual choices. A whole sort of reasons that why one individual chooses to become a terrorist and another doesn't can be very complex. Maybe it's just the fact that he meets an individual who has a connection to a group. Maybe it's the fact that he's a very charismatic fellow and meets a bunch of friends who have similar ideas, and he's the one who goes and reads something online that appeals to him specifically. We have to be quite careful to distinguish between what are sort of broad issues that are or sentiments that are felt along a large population, and the sort of specific individual causes that often tend to motivate specific individuals to join groups and try to carry out attacks.
But if a young Muslim guy, Osama, just as a final thought, reads about another drone attack, another family blown to pieces by another, Western drone, where's his anger expected to go?
Well, I think the problem is in your use of the word Western there, because you should think of a military drone. But war is a terrible thing, and it's certainly not only between Western and Muslim forces. I mean, look at Syria or Libya or Iraq, where you've got thousands of Muslims being killed by each other on a weekly basis, in Pakistan, for example. So people are right to be angry about the slaughter of innocents around the world, and everyone feels affinity to the co-religionists or even to people of the same race, etc. But the point is to understand all of this in perspective and say, well, let's try to stamp out war in the whole world. Let's push for an ethical and just foreign policy. And the idea of ummah in the Quran applies to your local state as well, to your neighborhood, more importantly than it does to people far away. So you have to be good neighbors before you're part of a global nation. And it's these kinds of basic ethical and moral choices which are so perverted. And the radical preachers actually legitimize it, you see, which is one of their dangers. There is this kind of atmosphere where it's easy to find bubbles or communities where it's okay to talk in very vehement anti-Western rhetoric while living in the West and enjoying all its benefits. That has to stop.
Thank you. Thank you both, Dr. Osama Hassan and Raffaello Pantucci. We want your thoughts, 0500 909 693. So why do homegrown terrorists want to blow us up? Jahan Mahmood is with us, works with young Muslim men in Birmingham on anti-radicalisation projects. Jahan, hello.
Hello, hi.
Hi, and we have got Councillor Wasim Zafar, Chair of Social Cohesion and Community Safety Scrutiny Committee at Birmingham City Council, former
Good
youth
morning,
worker.
Nicky.
Hello, Wasim.
Hi.
We've got John in Birmingham, Abdul in Leicester. let's hear from Abdul. Abdul, go on.
Yeah, I think there is prevention is always better than cure. Now we need to ascertain exactly what is the mindset of these people. Now, having said that, there are many Muslims who are absolutely infuriated by our foreign policy. I mean, look at it. On the one side, we're saying we're going to liberate a country, massacre up to a million innocent people, and say what liberation is that? So there is hypocrisy from our side, from our government. On the one side, at the same time, under the same breath, we do not condone violence. Islam, but this mindless planning of trying to kill innocent civilians is absolutely horrendous, immoral, unjust, totally irreligious, got nothing to do with Islam whatsoever. So, but having said that, you've got to understand that, like I said, prevention is better than cure. Why do these people come up with this sort of anger? Because there's frustration. On the one side, we're saying we're going to, like I said, liberate a country, but we're going to massacre them at the same time. That doesn't make sense.
So you can understand why they want to commit mass murder, can you?
No, I don't. Well, to a certain extent, yes. I mean,
to a certain extent, you can understand.
But not understand, but do not accept and do not condone such action.
But there are lots of people who are not Muslims that are equally angry with certain aspects of foreign policy who do not and would not countenance committing mass murder because of it. So what's the difference? What's the difference?
The people who plan any type of such action are mindless. Likewise, even our governments at the same time, they're mindless as well. When they go out, when they're throwing cluster bombs in areas and massacring innocent civilians at the same time. So it's on both sides. Like I said, prevention is better than cure. We need to, work together to get rid of this mindset.
And are you similarly angry about the violence perpetrated and committed by many of the regimes across the Middle East on Muslims and on Muslim people being violent towards Muslim people? Does that enrage you in a similar way?
Of course. Like in Syria, in Libya, you look at it. Obviously, no matter who, whether it's not to do with Muslim or non-Muslim.
Sunni violence on Shiites and Shiite violence on Sunnis. Yeah.
It's to do with the morals, it's to do with humanity. It's got nothing. Realistically, you don't have to look at it from a religious perspective. You have to look at it from a humanitarian perspective. At the same time...
But if we don't look at it from a religious perspective, why is it just people who have a religious perspective who want to go out and commit mass murder because of it?
Yeah, well, if that's what they are doing...
Why aren't there any atheists who are... Or people of other religions who are equally angry with aspects of British and Western foreign policy? Why don't they want to go onto tubes and bomb people?
Well, like I said, I don't understand. I mean, like I said, it's got nothing to do with Islam whatsoever. Right. No book, no hadith. We tell you that you kill innocent civilians, innocent people. It's out of the question.
Wasim Zafar, why is this happening, Wasim?
I think first and foremost, Nicky, there's well over 200,000 Muslims that reside in Birmingham. Birmingham is an incredibly diverse city. Here we have three complete idiots who have tried or who are planning a plot. We cannot brush the whole Muslim community and label them as terrorists, which I sometimes think some certain sections of society are trying to do here. These are three idiots. The Muslim community and community organizations working with Muslims were the ones that referred these three individuals and their wider team to the secret services, to the police. So Muslims are standing up against these sort of individuals. They're disowning these individuals. And like the individual said beforehand, Islam does not preach this whatsoever. This is a misinterpretation of Islam when these individuals go around and trying to plot to blow up areas of the country. I think what we also need to think about is these individuals are marginalised and radicalised. And we need to think about why they're marginalised. I think there is an issue here around integration. I think there's also an issue here of a lack of identity.
What's the issue around integration, Wasim? Tell us more about that.
I think we've got schools in Birmingham which are 90% one particular faith. I don't think that particularly preaches integration well. I don't think that supports community cohesion well. I think we need to look at how we can address that. I don't think that creates terrorists. I think that helps marginalise individuals. I think that's what we need to look at, the basics.
Nicky.
Who's that?
Nicky, it's John from Birmingham.
Oh.
When you've got a community which is isolated in the sense that they've got their own schools and they've got their own sort of mini sort of government and this sort of stuff, you're gonna get these sort of extremities.
We haven't got any mini. Sorry, I'm sorry. We haven't got any mini governments. What are you trying to say here? Birmingham is incredibly diverse city.
you've got communities which sort of pride over suburbs, and they have their own sort of schools, and they have their own sort of community centres, and they have their own sort of communities. And basically, you're going to encourage these sort of things. And you need to be open. I mean, it's okay saying that these are three idiots, but the problem is these are three idiots in amongst how many more are they? That are
come
there?
off it. There's 200,000 Muslims that reside in Birmingham. How many have come up in front of the courts on these sort of charges?
But we don't
know.
But we don't know. The problem is, because the community is isolated, we don't know what's going on.
Well, not. If you ask West Midlands Police who referred these particular individuals to them, can anyone explain to me how this conviction would have come about if it wasn't from intelligence and support within the Muslim communities that want to disown these particular individuals? Right, and we're only looking at a very,
the only time police, according to the newspapers on this, the only time police were contacted about any of them was over an allegation of aggressive fundraising concerning their charity street collections.
Yeah, can I come in there? Can I come in there?
Yeah, is that Jahan? Yeah, go on, Jahan.
Yeah, I'm listening to this conversation, and
so am I.
Yeah, I'm listening to it very, very closely. Muslim Aid was taken advantage of. These are individuals who are willing to take advantage of their own community. This idea that we're isolated is not true. We interact with the British public on a daily basis. If anything, relationships are growing and they're improving.
Hang on. We interact with the British public. You are the British public.
Well, but there's this kind of perception that we're not. That's what I'm trying to answer.
The perceptions come from your community.
No, how can it come from our community when there
because you feel as though you've got you're fighting wars back home where you should be respecting the community.
I'm sorry, this is my home.
And the community.
Yeah, look,
and basically,
let me just tell you something. My uncle fought for this country in the 14th British Army in Burma. He was a captive. He was a prisoner of war. There are many Muslims in this country whose ancestors have fought for this country. This idea that we're not part of this country and we're isolated is not true. We have a handful of idiots who, as far as we can see, are not even part of their own community. They're doing things that we completely disagree with. Killing innocent people. I mean, where's the bravery in that? And the other thing we have to understand is that some of these idiots are conflating British foreign policy with the British public. The whole entire British public. The British public is not responsible for some of the decisions that were made at that particular moment. Therefore, we have to understand that this is an isolated group of people who have got nothing in common, no shared values with the greater community, be they Muslim or non-Muslim. They've taken it into their own hands to feel that they're doing the right thing. They're completely misguided. They have a completely concocted a misrepresentation of their own faith, a misinterpretation. There's nothing in the Quran says that you could kill innocent people. There are clear verses that say, 1, you can't take your own life. 2, if you take the life of an innocent person, it's as if you've killed the entire humanity and you're on your way to hell.
People always point to the bit where it says, wherever you find the infidels, slay them.
Yeah, but it also says in the same verse, which is you're referring to Surah 2, verse 190, okay? Now, verses 190, 191 are very, very clear because it does say that, but it also says forgive and show mercy. So it's saying that take these things into calculation, but only when you're driven out of your own lands can you. This is a defensive war, not an offensive.
It's a complex message, though, isn't it? It's a theologically sophisticated message, and in the wrong hands of a preacher who chooses to interpret it a certain way, it's potentially a lethal message, isn't it?
Well, no, not necessarily. The Quran.
Well, clearly, the Quran, clearly it is sometimes.
No, the Quran and its commentary is very, very clear. If someone decides to impose their own view on it, then anything can be misinterpreted.
Right, run that by me again, that whole bit about going out and... What's the context of it? Go out, wherever you find the infidel, slay them. Because that's what some of these idiots, as you put it, that's their justification. So what's the context?
The context is to first to show mercy, is not to go and take the law into your own hands. It's very clear. I've got the verse right in front of me.
Excellent.
Right, and I'll read it out to you. Right. It says, fight in the cause of God those who fight you, but do not transgress limits, for God does not love transgressors. Then it goes on to say, slay them wherever ye catch them, and turn them out from where they have turned you out. This is a defensive war when you call on the back foot. Right? This is not an offensive. Nowhere does it say in that verse that you can blow yourself up or kill innocent people.
Yes, but if a preacher, if a wicked preacher teaching hate can say, look, it is a defensive war because our people are being killed by drones. Hey, fellas, it's a defensive...
Look,
no, all I'm saying to you is you can see how the message is getting mangled, can't you?
No, but any message could be mangled. It just takes an idiot to mangle it. Someone with a completely mangled brain in the first place is going to turn peace into war. Is going to turn a defensive war into an offensive war. Is going to turn something that is in some cases sacred into taking the life of innocent people. His own book, the same book that you're saying he misinterpreted, clearly states you cannot take innocent life.
I'm agreeing with you.
Right?
I'm agreeing with you. All I'm saying is you can understand the bits, and there are bits in the Old Testament as well, which some Christian fundamentalists take, it is argued, out of context. I'm just trying to understand and get to the point that some preachers are being selective.
They are being selective. We're in on this together.
We're all in this together.
We're all in this together and trying to defend our communities from these idiots.
Nicky, can I just come in here? It's Wasim here.
Wasim.
Yeah, you're right in a sense that at times the message is misinterpreted. However, communities here in Birmingham have stood up to that. We had Anjem Chaudhry try to come preach some of that hatred in this city. Hundreds of organisations, predominantly Muslim mosques, signed a statement to say we totally condemn this and we want Anjem Chaudhry off our streets. The individual you've got here, Jahan Mahmood, was one of a handful of individuals who went and challenged Anjem face to face to say he's not welcome in this city. So the Muslim community in Birmingham is standing up to these individuals who are preaching this hatred. So, we don't need any lessons from other individuals telling us what we need to do when it comes to standing up to these individuals.
Individuals who discredit Islam.
Absolutely.
And we totally disown them. We disown them and we stand up to them. We're the first to do that. The Muslim community in Birmingham is the first to stand up to these individuals who are preaching hatred because our religion doesn't teach us that.
It's 9:51. Here's Michelle.
This is 5 Live Breakfast. Your call.
Jahan Wasim still with us. Jahan and Wasim. And Ross in Somerset. Hello, Ross.
Hi there.
All yours.
I'm half Iraqi. I come from an Islamic background, but while all this terrible stuff has gone on and is gone on, I've never felt the urge to strap a bomb to myself and blow people up indiscriminately. I suspect that what it is a bunch of very lonely, frustrated guys who basically don't have relationships with the opposite sex.
Well, it's interesting because one of them conceded to police, just reading all about this, that if his two fellow plotters managed to find women who would have them, their anger with the world might have gone away.
Well, I used to be an angry guy, and then I got in a relationship, and I'm not an angry guy anymore. But I would liken it to a death cult. I mean, I don't even know why you attach Islam to it. I mean, I know they do, but it's a sort of a death cult. They're more interested in the worship of Kali, the goddess where you have to just go around murdering each other.
Kali's the wrong religion, but I understand kind of what you're getting at. Let's bring Steve in, who's been waiting a while. Hi, Steve, in the West Midlands.
Good morning, Nicky. Hello, am I?
You're on.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, I think that these guys that have been planning the bombing, you always have to look at the reason that these people quote Quranic scripture in the videos that they have, particularly when they're caught. You often find these martyr videos and that, and they're always quoting Quranic scripture. And that's because it is deliberately contradictory. I think the scholar that we had on a little bit earlier was a little bit disingenuous when he said that, no one innocent can be attacked by Muslims or something like that. Well, if someone rejects the teachings of the Quran and rejects Muhammad as a prophet, then according to Muslims, he is not innocent.
Well, apostasy, abandonment of faith, you mean? Which is
yes. I mean, why do they threaten to kill their own if they leave the faith?
Which is the case in
it's more political.
That is the case in certain countries. Yeah,
it's more totalitarian political ideology than religion anyway.
Jahan,
and that is the problem with it.
Yeah, no, the caller's got a valid point there. That's true that in some cases apostates are considered to be outside the fold of Islam and the death sentence.
Anyone who rejects
well, let's hear from Jahan's response.
Quran and the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad is considered the same way.
Let's hear Jahan's response.
So, for instance, the death sentence is imposed, but once again, it really depends on the interpretation. It depends on the clerics. This isn't a unanimous case across the Muslim world.
Thank goodness for that.
Can I just ask you one question then? Can I just ask you one question?
Go ahead.
How come that over 60% of the Quran is about the kafir? The infidel.
No, actually,
it's not.
No, the 60%. No, hold on. 1 minute. 1 minute.
Muhammad.
All right. Let's get Jahan. I was wanting to hear Jahan's answer. Wait a minute, Steve. Thank you.
Okay.
I want to hear Jahan's answer on apostasy because you're saying it's down to scholars' interpretations. So it's a bit of a luck of the draw, really, is it? Wherever you live in the world.
In some cases, yeah, it depends on.
Some guy with a beard says, "Well, you should die or live." Oh, well, thanks very much.
It depends on which part of the world that they reside, but also some scholars will deem that this is an absolute, and I'm not apologetic. I'm being absolutely honest.
I understand that.
On infidels, the gentleman just raised issue on infidels.
Can I just stop you 1 second? The judge in the Pistorius case, all the news as we hear it for you, the judge in the Pistorius case says he'll deliver his decision on whether to release the athlete on bail or not at midday. You'll hear it here, of course, on 5 Live. Sorry for interrupting, Jahan. Apostasy.
No, yeah, in terms of the infidel as well, the gentleman raised the question that 60% about the Quran is about infidels. This is not true. Let me just explain something. In the earlier case of the Prophet Muhammad, when his followers were being persecuted, he sent them to seek refuge under a Christian king. And he made it very clear to them to respect the law of the land and the king and his religion. And so we have interacted with non-Muslims from the very, very beginning, and we've been told to be kind to them. What these guys have tried to orchestrate or be involved in is completely abhorrent to the faith. And the other thing is, the gentleman also mentioned 60% of the Quran is talking about the infidel. Well, I have studied the Quran both at university and my private, privately as well, and that there's only one surah that's actually called the infidel, and it's towards the end of the Quran. And the Quran is explicit on so many different aspects of human life. This idea that 60% of it's just about the infidel is just nonsense.
Yeah, but there's one line in the Bible: "Suffer not a witch to live." I think it's in Exodus, and that was responsible for the execution of thousands of women across Western Europe over 300 or 400 years. So one line, Alan in Belfast, on you go.
Hello there, Nicky. Well, it seems to me, I've been listening with great interest this morning, and it seems to me that the debate seems to have moved more or less straight away into religious realms. And maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but my view is that when human beings started to believe that maybe there's something greater that they should believe in, that they should have a faith in whatever shape or form, so no matter what the religion is, there will be people that will start to believe that and immerse themselves in it and taking it to the extremes. And religion's based on fear. Whatever way you look at it, it's based on fear. If you don't behave in a particular way or believe a particular thing, there will be consequences. And the consequences, I suppose, change from religion to religion, but basically they all boil down to the same thing. And when you get extremists like that, they will take things further and further and further. And these homegrown terrorists that the whole question's about, they are just unfortunate to be in a place at a time where they've been suckered into believing what extremists have told them. And that's what it all comes down to. So if we had a completely secular society with no religion, people and communities would have to learn to integrate and live and work together. And so it's not anybody's fault other than the fact that religion, as the human race has evolved with them, and people take it further and further and further to the extremes.
Thank you very much indeed. Have a happy and peaceful weekend, everybody. Thank you very much for listening. All the breaking news with you on 5 Live throughout